Police serves Barron Trump, saw note on check, and burst into tears. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories, or please complete our 1,000 subscribers. Police serves Barron Trump, saw note on check, and burst into tears. It was a crisp December morning in 2024 when Officer Daniel Hartley, a 35-year-old single father from small-town Missouri, found himself assigned a peculiar duty, delivering a court order to none other than Barron Trump. The request had come through official channels, and although it felt surreal, Hartley approached it as any other task. He had no political ties or strong feelings about the Trump family, just the resolve to do his job. When he arrived at the understated yet guarded New York townhouse, he handed over the document to Barron, now 18 and standing taller than his father ever did, his face mature but still carrying a hint of youthfulness. They exchanged polite greetings and Daniel prepared to leave. That's when Barron, in a quiet but firm voice, asked the officer to wait. The young man walked into the house and returned with a small folded check. He handed it to Daniel, saying simply, "For you." Surprised and slightly uncomfortable, Daniel hesitated but eventually accepted it, assuming it was some bureaucratic formality. Back in his patrol car, Daniel opened the check, and his breath hitched. It wasn't the amount that shocked him. It was the note scrawled on the back. For those who never gave up on their duty, even when the world gave up on them. Merry Christmas, Officer Hartley. Daniel's hands trembled as tears blurred his vision. He hadn't told anyone about the financial struggles he'd been facing since his ex-wife's medical bills piled up after her sudden illness, or how he'd been picking up extra shifts to afford his 10-year-old daughter, Sophie's Christmas gift, an art set she had been dreaming of for months. The note wasn't signed, but something about the simplicity of the gesture and the timing struck Daniel deeply. He sat there staring at the words, replaying the brief interaction with Barron, wondering if the young man somehow knew more about him than he let on. As Daniel wiped his eyes and started the engine, he felt an unfamiliar warmth settle in his chest, a mix of gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. Little did he know, the story behind the check and its note was only beginning to unfold, one that would intertwine his life with Barron's in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The drive home that evening was quiet, but Daniel's mind was anything but. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the gesture than met the eye. He decided not to tell anyone, not his partner at the precinct, not even Sophie. He tucked the check into his wallet, unsure of what to do with it. That night, as he tucked Sophie into bed, she looked up at him with her wide, hopeful eyes and asked, "Daddy, do you think Mommy can see us from heaven?" Her question hit him like a punch to the chest, and all he could manage was a soft, "I think she can, sweetheart." Sophie had been drawing pictures of her mother since the day of the funeral, filling their small apartment with rainbows, angels, and flowers. She'd talk about how her mother always told her, "No matter how hard things get, there's always someone who will help you." Daniel often wondered if Sophie said it to comfort him more than herself. The next day, Daniel couldn't resist the curiosity any longer. He decided to call the bank listed on the check, not to cash it, but to ask about its origin. The bank representative was hesitant at first, but confirmed something Daniel couldn't have anticipated. The account wasn't Barron Trump's. It was a private family fund used for acts of kindness. Perplexed, Daniel replayed the interaction in his mind. Why him? Why now? And why did Barron Trump, of all people, have anything to do with this mysterious fund? He didn't know how to answer these questions, but they gnawed at him all day. Later that week, Daniel found a package waiting for him at the precinct. It was wrapped in simple brown paper with no return address. Inside was a carefully curated art set with a small card that read, "For Sophie. Never stop painting her rainbows." Daniel's hand shook as he read the words. He sat down at his desk, his head in his hands, overcome by the emotions he had been holding back since that day outside the Trump townhouse. He wanted to thank Barron, to explain what this meant to him and his daughter. But as much as he tried, every inquiry he made led to a dead end. It seemed that whoever was behind this wanted no recognition, just the satisfaction of knowing they had touched someone's life. Daniel decided to take Sophie to New York that Christmas. He didn't tell her the real reason for the trip. He just said it was time for a little adventure. As they walked the bustling streets lit with holiday cheer, Sophie clutched her new sketch pad, drawing every sight that caught her eye. But Daniel had another destination in mind. He found himself standing once again in front of that same townhouse. Sophie, sensing something important, squeezed his hand and whispered, "Is this where Mommy's rainbows come from?" Before Daniel could answer, the door opened. This time, it wasn't Barron. It was a woman in her late 40s, her face kind but cautious. "Can I help you?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "I'm not sure, but I think someone here already has." The woman's eyes softened, and she invited them inside. What happened next would change the course of their lives forever. But for now, the story was just beginning. Daniel and Sophie stepped cautiously into the townhouse, their footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The woman led them into a cozy sitting room adorned with warm, soft lighting and shelves brimming with books. A fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. She gestured for them to sit, but Daniel couldn't quite relax. His mind was spinning with questions. "My name is Ellen," the woman said gently, sitting across from them. Her voice carried a calm authority, but her eyes held an almost maternal kindness. "You're here because of Barron, aren't you?" Daniel nodded, his throat suddenly dry. Sophie, clutching her sketch pad, nestled closer to her father. "I didn't know who else to ask," Daniel admitted. "I don't want to intrude, but the check, the gift for Sophie, it's more than just kindness. It feels like someone knows us, knows what we've been through, and I need to understand why." Ellen smiled faintly, a bittersweet expression. "You're not wrong. Barron saw something in you, something he couldn't ignore. But he's not the only one who's been paying attention." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Moments later, Barron Trump himself appeared in the doorway. He was dressed simply, his tall frame slightly hunched, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Yet his eyes, sharp and introspective, locked onto Daniel and Sophie with an intensity that made Daniel's heart race. "Officer Hartley?" Barron said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I owe you an explanation." Sophie looked up at Barron with wide eyes, her small voice breaking the tension. "Did you send me the art set?" she asked. "It's the best gift I've ever gotten." Barron knelt down to her level, a soft smile breaking across his face. "I did. But I think it's because your rainbows remind me of something. Someone I used to know." Sophie tilted her head, curious. "Who?" Barron hesitated, his gaze flickering to Daniel as if seeking permission to continue. When Daniel gave a subtle nod, Barron spoke, his voice quieter now. "My mother. She used to tell me that even the darkest storms can't hide the rainbows forever." His voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat, standing up abruptly. Ellen stepped in, her hand lightly resting on Barron's arm. "Barron and I have been working on something together," she explained. "A fund to quietly help those who remind us of the people we've lost. When Barron met you, Officer Hartley, he saw the kind of strength his mother admired most. Strength rooted in love." Daniel swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "But how could you possibly know what we've been through?" he asked, his voice trembling. Barron looked him straight in the eye. "Because I've been through it too," he said simply. The room fell silent, the crackling of the fire the only sound. Sophie, sensing the gravity of the moment, climbed onto her father's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. Daniel held her close, his heart heavy with unspoken emotions. Barron took a deep breath. "I don't just want to help you, Officer Hartley. I want to understand. I want to know how people like you keep going when it feels like the world has taken everything." Daniel was stunned. He didn't have an easy answer, but he could feel the sincerity in Barron's words. For the first time, he saw not the son of a billionaire, but a young man searching for meaning in his own pain. Ellen spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes, the people we try to help end up helping us in ways we never expect. Maybe that's what's happening here." Daniel sat back, his mind racing. He had come looking for answers, but what he found instead was a connection. One that felt impossibly profound, yet strangely natural. As the fire crackled on and the evening deepened, the three of them began to talk, sharing stories, questions, and hopes. None of them realized it yet, but this meeting was the beginning of something far greater. A story of healing, understanding, and the kind of love that transcends loss. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt that he wasn't facing it alone. The hours stretched on as Daniel, Sophie, Barron, and Ellen shared pieces of their lives. Barron listened intently as Daniel recounted the struggles of being a widowed father, his voice breaking when he spoke of Sophie's resilience in the face of losing her mother. Sophie, in her innocent way, chimed in with small anecdotes about her mother, bringing a softness to the room that melted the heaviness in the air. Barron opened up too, cautiously at first, about the unique loneliness he felt growing up in the shadow of fame and scrutiny. He spoke of how his mother had been his anchor, her quiet strength and unwavering love, a guiding light in his life. "She always told me that no matter how hard things got, I should never stop looking for the good in people," Barron said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's why I started the fund. It's my way of honoring her." Ellen, watching the bond forming between them, smiled warmly. "You know," she said, "sometimes the people we think we're helping end up teaching us more about ourselves. I think your mother would be proud, Barron." As the evening wore on, Sophie grew sleepy, curling up against Daniel's chest. Barron watched her with a wistful expression. "She's lucky to have you," he said quietly. "I can see how much you love her." Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening. "She's my everything. I just want her to have the kind of life her mom would have wanted for her." Barron hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for her," he said, handing it to Daniel. "It's not just money, it's an opportunity. There's a program in the city for young artists. It's run by one of my mother's closest friends. If Sophie wants to explore her talent, this could be a place for her to grow." Daniel opened the envelope and found a letter of recommendation alongside a generous check meant to cover expenses. His breath hitched as he looked at Barron, overwhelmed by the gesture. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let her follow her dreams," Barron said simply. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he nodded. "Thank you," he whispered. Ellen stood and gently placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You came here looking for answers," she said, "but maybe what you found was a new beginning." As Daniel carried Sophie out into the chilly night, her head resting on his shoulder, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. He looked back at the townhouse where Barron stood in the doorway, watching them leave with a quiet smile. Life had been unkind to both of them in different ways, but in that moment Daniel realized something profound. Healing didn't always come from fixing what was broken. Sometimes it came from finding others who understood the cracks and choosing to move forward together. Weeks later, Sophie's artwork was accepted into the program, and Daniel began to see her spirit blossom in ways he hadn't imagined. As for Barron, he continued his quiet acts of kindness, but something about his connection with Daniel and Sophie stayed with him, reminding him of the rainbows his mother always spoke of. Their paths crossed again, and each time the bond grew stronger. Together, they built something neither of them had expected. A family of sorts, forged not by blood but by shared pain, compassion, and the belief that even in the darkest storms, love and kindness could find a way to shine through. And though their story had its share of heartbreak, it also carried the promise of brighter days, a story that, like Sophie's rainbows, would continue to grow with every stroke of hope they added to it.